Hey guys! Hey everybody! Welcome to Learning Japanese Lesson 5. Today before we delve into actual grammar, grammatical patterns, and other synonyms of that word, I'm gonna cover some basic phrases in Japanese, and although these are basic, they're pretty useful for helping you get started. Imagine them as the phrases and terms that you would want to know if you were visiting the country without any prior language experience of Japanese. So let's just get started. First up are greetings in Japanese. So when we want to say good morning to someone, and say we see someone we are familiar with on the street right at 6 a.m. before we go party hardy, we say Ohayo. Ohayo. Like I said, this is the more familiar version of this term. If we want to say it to someone who we need to show respect, like a sensei, which is a teacher, or anyone else of superior status, we say Ohayo gozaimasu. And the gozaimasu is supposed to be a supplementary part of the phrase that implies you are being polite. In contrast, we have the word Konichiwa, which is basically good afternoon, or it could be casually interpreted as just hi or hello. The time of usage for Konichiwa is usually just like an hour before noon to before sundown. And the thing with Konichiwa is that there's no distinction between the casual version, which doesn't exist, or the polite version, which doesn't exist, because they're one and the same. There is something to know for Konichiwa though, is that you are limited to saying it to the same person only once per day. So basically, if you see someone at 11:30 and you go Konichiwa, then you go off on your merry way, then you see them again at the market or whatever right before going home at like 5 p.m. You can't say Konichiwa again. That's ridiculous. It's kind of weird, yeah, because in English you can say hey to someone and say hey again later, and you might be scratching your head as to what you would say to someone if you saw them for the second time of the day. You might not know the words right now, but we could say something like, so we meet again, or funny seeing you here, and blah blah blah. Next, we have konbanwa, which is basically good evening. It's the last of the trio of greetings of the day, and like konnichiwa, there is no distinction between polite and casual for it, but you can say it more than once to the same person on the same day. So go crazy. Now we move on to the salutations of departure, and we're gonna start off with the pretty well-known phrase Sayonara. And basically all it means is goodbye. There's no polite or casual distinction for this word, but there is a goodbye that is more polite than it, and that is shitsure shimasu. And basically what this phrase means exactly is please excuse my rudeness. And you could relate it to the English term excuse me when you're, say, leaving a room of people or leaving the dinner table, and that's generally the way that you want to use it too, in the sense that those kind of peers that you have, like a teacher or a business meeting or something like that, you would want to say shitsure shimasu upon leaving instead of sayonara. So then, if there's no casual or polite for sayonara, is there a more casual term at least to use in lieu of sayonara? And the answer is, you bet your... Yes, there is, and that is Matata. And what this phrase literally means is again tomorrow. So you use this in a casual scenario with your friends, buddies, whatever, and basically it's very akin to the English see you later, because you guys are gonna see each other again, and you don't have to have plans to meet again tomorrow to use that phrase. Just as a little record, it's just one of those kinks of round that. So thanking someone and welcoming someone or saying you're welcome to someone. In Japanese, when you want to say thank you, you can say arigato, and that is a very casual terminology. You can make it more polite by saying arigato gozaimasu, or you can make it even more polite by saying domo arigato gozaimasu. And that's a pretty rare instance, but the thing to know is that domo basically means very much. So it's just adding a very much to the thank you, making it thank you very much. When you want to say you're welcome to someone, you say do itashimashite. And this is a pretty unique response to thank you in that you should be kind of careful in how you use it, because when you do use it, it implies that you've done something worth thanking for. So if you just throw it around willy-nilly, you'll seem pretty darn arrogant, implying that people have things to thank you for. And yeah, if you'd like a substitute to do itashimashite, you can use ie, which is basically saying no, but the implicit meaning here is that, oh no, you don't have to thank me, or don't mention it, or it's nothing really. When you are apologizing, you have a choice between two basic phrases, and the two are gomennasai and sumimasen. It is to my personal understanding that sumimasen is the more polite way to apologize, and it's the way that you should always apologize to teachers and people of authority, because saying gomennasai to them is casual enough to be insulting, I believe. And gomennasai also has a casual form to it, and it's just gomen. That in itself is a very casual response, and there are even more casual ways to apologize, such as saying warui, which literally means bad, so you're just admitting that you did something bad but not necessarily apologizing for it. And there are some more that we might cover later on as we talk about casual and more slang terms. Japanese culture takes its food and meals pretty seriously, so they have their own terms of acknowledgement before eating a meal and after eating a meal. You can relate this to the commonly used French term bon appetit to symbolize a kind of appreciation towards the meal. In English, I'm not sure if there's a correlation. Maybe the simple term let's eat, or maybe just having a prayer before eating is something along those lines. So before eating, in Japanese, people usually say itadakimasu, and this basically means I received this meal, but it's supposed to have a humble tone to it. When we finish eating a meal and we want to express appreciation in the Japanese language, we say gochiso-sama. And while the more literal meaning behind this is something along the lines of you went through so much trouble to make the food, it's more interpreted as thank you for the meal, or thanks for the treat, or something along those lines. If you want to be even more polite in conveying your admiration or appreciation, you can use gochiso-sama deshita. And the deshita at the end is that key notifier of a multiplier of politeness. So at night, we usually say good night if there are people in our presence close enough to hear our speaking. In Japanese, this is also so, and the term that we use to say good night is oyasumi. And this term also has the polite version that is similar to gomennasai in that it is oyasumi nasai. Let's imagine the scenario in which you're talking to a Japanese speaker and you do or don't, more commonly don't understand what he or she just said or is saying. So how do we express that state of confusion or misunderstanding? Well, we use the term wakarimasen, which basically means I don't understand. Another option is to use a different form of the same word, wakarimasen deshita. And generally the two conjugations of that word mean the same thing, but if you want to be really specific about this, then the wakarimasen means that you just don't understand in general as to what the person said, and wakarimasen deshita refers to a particular part that he probably just said. Note that we could also be really polite in saying this by adding a sumimasen in the beginning, which is an apology. So Sumimasen wakarimasen deshita means sorry, I didn't understand. So now we are gonna talk about how to introduce yourself and talk about the simplest things in Japanese. First, we need to discuss what the particle wa in Japanese means. So you'll notice that I'm pronouncing the character wa even though it's written like the character ha that we covered in previous videos. And the reason behind that isn't clear cut, but just know that when you're using it as a particle and what it's used for in grammatical sentences as a topic marker, it's pronounced that way but spelled the same way as ha. So like I just hinted at, in Japanese, the wa particle is a topic marker, and a lot of new Japanese speakers will be confused about this concept because on the surface when we use the particle wa, it's easy to misconceive it as a direct translation of the English word is, in that it tells you that this noun is the subject of the sentence. But that isn't quite true. The only thing that you can be sure of when you see wa is that it marks the topic. So now let's move into some phrases that use the particle wa. Let's say my name is George Washington, and in the Japanese katakana version of that first name George, it's pronounced Joji. So let's go with Joji Washington for now as me. So if I want to introduce myself, I say I could first greet the person I'm talking to by saying Ohayo, Konichiwa, or Konbanwa, depending on the time of the day. Then I say Watashi wa Joji Washington desu. And if you remember from our previous video, Watashi means I, so that translates to I. Joji Washington translates to the alias that I'm using currently for this video. And desu is kind of a signal of finalization in the sentence. It means much more than that, but that's not a point of coverage in this video, so we'll overlook that for now. So basically, Watashi wa Joji Washington desu translates literally to I am George Washington. Subsequently, it's not uncommon to ask a person for their name after introducing your own name. So how would I ask a person for their name? Well, I would say onomae wa. And the direct translation of this isn't what you would think. For example, what is your name? Instead, the sentence pretty much just translates to name. While indeed we have the wa in that sentence that could be interpreted as is, making the sentence name is, it's more complicated than that because the only thing that wa definitively does in this sentence is marks the word namae or onamae, which means name, as the subject. So when you hear this sentence, what you're interpreting is name. And do note that the sentence is pronounced with a rising intonation, as to say that you are asking a question and missing a piece of information that you need to complete the sentence. Now you might think just saying name to someone is kind of impolite to say in English, but there are some mechanics at work here for the Japanese language that implies that you are trying to be your utmost polite. First of all, we have the beautifier o in front of namae to make it o namae. And we'll cover beautifiers in another video, but the gist of it is really that you're adding these particles in front of certain words to show that you admire or appreciate them, which is why they're called beautifiers. So in retort to my question, the person that I was addressing would answer in the same way that I phrased the first greeting. Watashi wa blank desu. What would I proceed to say in that situation? Well, I would say hajimemashite, which means nice to meet you. And what hajimemashite literally means is we are meeting for the first time. So you're only gonna say this phrase to someone once, basically, in your entire relationship's lifespan, because there's only one beginning. And the expected response to this phrase on behalf of the other person is the phrase dozo yoroshiku, which means literally something along the lines of please treat me nicely. And for the most part, yeah, that's basically only going to be said once in your entire relationship's lifespan as well, because you should really only need to tell somebody once to please treat you nicely before you rid them out of your lives for not complying with that request. So those are some very basic Japanese phrases to know when getting started with the language and getting started with some peers and trying to begin practicing talking. It was short, but we're gonna get into basic grammar now, and you'll be able to create your own sentences soon enough. So thanks for watching this video, and stay tuned for lesson 6.